With me on the panel today are Jordan Garfinkel to my immediate left. He's with our Climate Strategies Group. And to his left is Na Huang. She's with our Transportation Group, also in the Bureau of Air and Waste. Please note that this hearing is being audio taped. It is also being videotaped by the gentleman in the back of the room. We are here today at 1 p.m. on February 6th in Boston, Massachusetts, at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, Boston office, to accept testimony concerning a set of proposed regulations and amendments related to greenhouse gas emissions. Before it is submitted to the Massachusetts Secretary of State as a revision to the Code of Massachusetts regulations. To begin, Jordan will read the public hearing notice announcing these hearings, which was published in the Boston Globe and the Worcester Telegram and Gazette on December 30th. When I am finished, we will open the hearing to public comment. First, we will hear from any public officials in attendance. Next, commenters will be called in order in which we received the record of attendance forms. So if you came in and you did not fill out one of these green forms, please get one out front and fill it in. That's how we are keeping a record of who attended the hearing. That's how we will get in touch with you when we are going to finalize the rule. And that's also how we're going to call people to testify. So again, if you have not filled one of those out, please do so. I'm going to turn it to Jordan. He is going to read the public hearing notice.
So it's a bit of a long notice, so just bear with me. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, under its authority pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 21A, subsections 2, 8, and 16, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 111, Section 2C, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 111, subsections 142A, and Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 21N, commonly known as the Global Warming Solutions Act, subsections, or sections 3C, 3D, 4, and 7, will hold public hearings in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, on proposed amendments to 310 CMR 7, air pollution control, and 310 CMR 60, air pollution control for mobile sources. In accordance with the Supreme Judicial Court's decision in the case of Kane v. DEP, 474, Massachusetts 278, 2016, directing Mass DEP to promulgate new regulations in accordance with Section 3D of the GWSA that establish declining aggregate greenhouse gas emissions on multiple categories of GHG emission sources in the Commonwealth, and Governor Baker's Executive Order 569, directing Mass DEP and other agencies to reduce GHG emissions to meet the goals set in the GWSA. Mass DEP proposes to amend 310 CMR 7 and 310 CMR 60, including 310 CMR 771 Section 9 to change the regulation to conform to changes to retail seller GHG emission reporting required in 310 CMR 775, 310 CMR 772 to establish mass-based annually declining aggregate limits on sulfur hexafluoride emissions from active gas-insulated switchgear owned by large utilities, establish aggregate limits on the same utilities, prevent increases in SF6 emissions that could otherwise occur due to use of additional GIS equipment, and maintain the stringency of the existing program by retaining the SF6 leak rate. 310 CMR 773 to establish mass-based annually declining limits on methane emissions from mains and services for individual natural gas distribution system operators with a gas system enhancement plan under order from DPU, and establish mass-based annually declining aggregate limits on total methane emissions from mains and services owned by all gas operators with a GSEP. 310 CMR 774 to establish mass-based annually declining limits on GHG emissions from power plants in Massachusetts to ensure reductions associated with current electricity sector policies in the Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2020 update will occur in Massachusetts. These policies include new clean energy supplies, energy efficiency, and the proposed clean energy standard regulation at 310 CMR 775. Establish a process for apportioning the aggregate limit on GHG emissions among existing and new power plants in Massachusetts. Include a mechanism for power plants to earn and use over-compliance credits, providing compliance flexibility, and require annual compliance reporting. 310 CMR 775 to establish obligations on retail electricity sellers to provide an annually increasing percentage of power from clean energy sources, define clean energy based on a GHG emissions-based performance standard, regardless of the technology used to generate the electricity, capture additional low and zero emissions generation technologies that are not included in the existing Renewable Portfolio Standard program as implemented by DOER, and set the stringency of the clean energy standard to support achieving the power plant GHG emissions limits set by 310 CMR 774. 310 CMR 60.05 to establish mass-based annually declining aggregate limits on carbon dioxide emissions from MassDOT operations, establish mass-based annually declining aggregate targets for reductions of carbon dioxide emissions from certain transportation sector sources in the Commonwealth, require MassDOT to calculate and report on whether its CO2 emissions limit and the sector targets were achieved each year, and implement supplemental measures and initiatives within the areas of MassDOT's responsibilities if its emissions limit is not met. 310 CMR 60.06 to establish mass-based annually declining limits on CO2 emissions from the passenger vehicle fleet owned or leased by each secretariat in the executive branch in the Commonwealth, and require each secretariat to report annually on their passenger and non-passenger vehicle fleets, including whether the annual CO2 emissions limit on their passenger vehicle fleet was achieved. The proposed amendments and a background document are available on the Mass DEP website. Public hearings will be held Monday, February 6, 2017, from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., and at 6 p.m. at Mass DEP's Boston office at 1 Winter Street in Boston. Monday, February 6, 2017, at 9 a.m. at Mass DEP's Southeast Regional Office, 20 Riverside Drive in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Wednesday, February 8, 2017, at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. at Mass DEP's Central Regional Office at 8 New Bond Street in Worcester, Massachusetts. And Wednesday, February 8, 2017, at 2 p.m. at the Springfield Central Library, 220 State Street in Springfield, Massachusetts. If one or more of the previously scheduled public hearings is canceled due to inclement weather, additional public hearings will be held on Friday, February 10, 2017, at 9 a.m. at Mass DEP's Boston office and Mass DEP's Central Regional Office in Worcester. The last hearing at each location will remain open until all parties in attendance have been heard, with the exception of the Springfield Public Library that closes at 8 p.m. Testimony may be presented orally or in writing at the public hearings. Mass DEP will accept written comments until 5 p.m. on February 24, 2017. Written comments may be submitted in the following 3 ways: through the online portal available on the Mass DEP website, by email to climate.strategies@state.ma.us, or by mail to Jordan Garfinkel, Mass DEP, 7th floor, 1 Winter Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 0210.
Thank you, Jordan. So once again, if you're in the room and you haven't filled out one of these green forms, please do so. We have a pretty good crowd today, so we're going to ask people to keep their testimony to 5 minutes, and I am going to start the testimony. So I will ask anyone who wishes to offer testimony to please come forward when called and identify yourself by affiliation and name prior to presenting any testimony. If you have written testimony, please submit it to me, and I will distribute it to the panel. I will now open testimonies, and the first person I will call is Kate Victor.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Christine, and to the panel. My name is Kate Victor. I am the Assistant Secretary for Policy Coordination at Mass DOT, and it is a pleasure to be here today and to see so many folks. I just sort of wanted to start by thanking DEP for their partnership in working with us as this regulation has been developed. Obviously, transportation is a major component of it. Obviously, we are aware that the transportation sector is the only part of the Commonwealth's economy with increasing GHG emissions, and it is something that is of great concern to us. So we are really glad to have been able to work with DEP as this regulation has evolved, and we are curious to see where the public comment take it from here. In addition, it is important for us just to state that MassDOT actually does not really have the regulatory tools over the use of fossil fuels in the Commonwealth, so we are working to find alternative ways to address the very important issues related to carbon emissions. Again, we are really looking forward to seeing how the reg comes out and how we can implement the ultimate requirements of it. But in the interim, we are actually doing a lot to try to reduce our carbon footprint and the carbon for which we are responsible. And forgive me, I did not memorize this list, but I did just want to let everybody know. And in particular, these actions relate to 2 main buckets of activities that we have. The first relates to our fleet and how we make our fleet increasingly clean. And there really are sort of two main parts of our fleet. The first is what everybody sees on the roads, primarily MBTA buses, things that we use for passengers. And the others are things that we use as part of our work, snowplows, cars that we use to get around. Both of those we have for the last decade or more been switching over to hybrids and now to electric. And we'll be doing more and more of that. The other thing that we really do is to use our planning process to try to emphasize the construction of transportation projects that will allow people to move around in a carbon lighter kind of way. And we will do that more and more as we move forward. The other types of things that we do, in addition to our buses on the fleet side, obviously commuter rail is a major user of diesel in the Commonwealth. And we are gradually replacing our locomotives with new locomotives that are more efficient. We also are increasingly trying to use plug-ins where possible. We are installing renewable energy and solar energy panels on MassDOT and MBTA-owned property, and we'll continue to do that. We're trying to make our own facilities more fuel efficient, and we're doing what we can to install upgrades at our buildings, and we will keep doing that. We fund a travel demand management program, which people may have used if you've ever called the Mass Rides number that you see along the highways. If you need help trying to figure out what T-service you could use, how to use bike share, things like that. That's something we've done for many years. A big initiative of ours really realized over the past year was the full introduction of all electronic tolling on the Massachusetts Turnpike. Greatly reduced congestion on the pike, even exceeded our wildest hopes, and we hope to see more coming out of that. We worked with DEP to receive federal designation as an electric vehicle corridor, which we're going to continue to work on. A couple other things, we, as everybody probably knows, are always trying to improve the state of good repair of the MBTA, so that's a more appealing and possible option for people. And lastly, we are investing both money and technical assistance in a new Complete Streets program, which encourages municipalities to provide a higher level of pedestrian and bicycle access for people traveling around. And we will do more of that. We have so far, I think, funded 26 capital projects under that program, and more than 100 municipalities have received training in the Complete Streets concepts. So lastly, because we feel this issue is so incredibly important, we plan to create a new working group within MassDOT as the regs are being finalized, to focus on the things that are sort of outside what we call our bubble of emissions, which is the emissions that we directly produce, to see what more we can do along these kinds of lines, and we welcome input and comments on that. And I will submit comments, but can it be tomorrow after I clean these up? I will take care of it. And who gets it next? Thank you, everybody.
Yes, I'm Mary Lampert, Director of Pilgrim Watch, which is a citizen organization focused largely on the Pilgrim nuclear reactor, but also nuclear reactors in general. We do not support current or any future nuclear reactors qualifying as eligible clean energy generators. We feel they've been feeding at the trough long enough to the detriment of consumer prices, the environment, and to the development of truly clean energy alternatives. The proposed standard currently does not propose to include existing generators in the CES, even if they adhere to the emission-based threshold. But DEP, we feel, improperly backtracked to come to lobbying and is re-reviewing this. Synapse issued a report on the request of DEP, and they explained in full why not to include older generators and nuclear reactors. And nothing has changed since that report was issued. They indicated that, let's say, the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, if it were included in gut credits, because it does not itself emit carbon, because it's a very large generator, receive a huge buckets full of credits, which it in turn could sell to the dirtiest polluters. Because to meet the standard, you can either not emit carbon yourself, or you can buy carbon credits from others. So what would that achieve? It would achieve prolonging the life of a very old reactor that is judged by NRC to be among the 3 least safe in the country. They'd laugh all the way to the bank, and it would increase prices in general for electricity. Massachusetts, we know, can meet its carbon reduction goals without changing course and by excluding nuclear reactors. The Massachusetts Clean Energy Center's 2016 report announced that Massachusetts added 6,317 clean energy jobs, which is 10 times plus the number of jobs at Pilgrim Station. And there are now in Massachusetts 105, 2012, and 212 clean energy jobs statewide. The number of jobs in Massachusetts has increased clean energy jobs by 75% since 2010. It's $11.8 billion industry, 2.5% of the Commonwealth's gross state product. The jobs represent 2.9% of the overall workforce in the state, and these workers are throughout the Commonwealth, not simply in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And these jobs clearly fit our workforce, which is known for its skills and capability to move forward in these jobs. These are good paying jobs. They're more than 70% of them, folks earn $50,000 or more. And another fact is we know there is enough truly clean power. We have hydro coming. Certainly solar is expanding, offshore wind, and then there's great success and progress in efficiency. And we are investing in new electrical transmission and working on batteries to store power. So with this progress that has been made, with statements by the administration, by Secretary Beaton, why would we want to reverse course, put a brake on the development of clean energy? It makes absolutely no sense. As for nuclear, it does not produce carbon itself. However, if you look at the whole fuel cycle, it is a very carbon-intense industry. Also, we know that it is an industry that has been heavily subsidized to the detriment of other clean sources. For example, we, the taxpayers, will be responsible in the long run if there's an accident. Their insurance is paid for, the Price-Anderson Act, and their waste will be paid for over 250,000 years. What other industry can say that? Not only can we say that although it does emit carbon, it emits radiation, and the National Academy of Sciences Tier 7 report indicated there is no safe dose. So does it make sense to substitute one long-lived and highly toxic poison for another? No, that doesn't make sense. Instead, we have other alternatives, and that's the route that we should be taking. And thank you for the opportunity.
Next is Suzanne Hitchcock-Bryan.
I'm Suzanne Hitchcock-Bryan. I'm from Winthrop, and I'm with Mothers Out Front. Yes, I would like to thank the DEP for your incredibly important and difficult work. Yes, I'm from Winthrop, and it's a community surrounded by water. on 3 sides. I once gave Speaker DeLeo, who lives in Winthrop, a child life vest for his granddaughter. I am here because I don't want Speaker DeLeo's granddaughter or my grandchildren to need a life vest to go out their front door. I'm with Mothers Out Front, and if I can paraphrase some Hamilton lyrics, mothers, we get the job done. And our job today is to ask you to please sharpen your pencils. Today, more than ever, we have to sharpen our pencils to get the most robust strategies to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we need accurate baseline measurements of methane gas leaks. Real numbers, not estimates used to calculate emission factors. Now more than ever, we have to act locally. So I was just wondering why we're using a University of Washington study, which was supported by utility companies, to base calculations on Massachusetts emissions. Why not use our local studies, BU, Harvard, for instance, which used, I believe, ground measurements. And if we're really talking about doing state-of-the-art, and in your document you do mention that, ground measurements, I would think, would be the way to go. You have included reduction proposals for the electric sector, if I'm reading your document correctly, which go beyond 2020. And I think that's wonderful, and I would just ask you to do the same for methane. Again, I applaud your difficult work, and if I may conclude by paraphrasing David Frum, his words are apt in addressing climate change. We are living through the most dangerous challenge to the United States, and I'll add to our planet. And what happens next is up to you and me. Don't be afraid. This moment can be our finest hour as citizens, as Americans, and as inhabitants of planet Earth. Thanks.
Sue Stafford, can you hear me? A resident of Cambridge. And I just want to start by saying that in these incredibly turbulent times, I am so grateful to be able to be speaking to you, a department that has an opportunity to do make positive, significant changes. So like a breath of fresh air of what's going on. As I said, my name is Sue Stafford. I'm a resident of Cambridge and a member of Mothers Out Front. I'm also a grandmother, and it's with my grandmother heart that I come here today. I waited for years for my 2 married sons to tell me that there were grandchildren on the way. I began to think that maybe we'd neglected to read that chapter of the book to them. But I often thought all was for the best. Climate change would undoubtedly wreak havoc on the environment and throw our society into chaos. If there were grandchildren, I would fear for their future. And then my granddaughter Ada was born, and now there's a little boy on the way. Such joy. For those of you who are parents or grandparents, you know what I'm talking about. And yet, I can't help asking myself, why are they doing this? My sons and their wives are well educated. They respect the science of climate change. So why are they having children at all? I think the answer is that they trust. Just as their children trust them, they trust us, you and me, to do whatever it takes to ensure that our planet remains the glorious, verdant, sparkling gem that they have had the privilege to know. So what do we have to do to make all this happen? I think we can start by doing three things as you think about the regulations here. First, think long term. If we're to live up to the trust placed in us by our children, we need long-term caps, way beyond 2020. It's their future we're talking about. At the very least, we need a plan that will get us from where we are now all the way to where we need to go. Perhaps caps on with a rolling revision every 6 years. Second, we need to use real numbers. We know that our aging gas infrastructure is leaking at a rate greater than the national average. So developing a baseline using estimates based on those averages won't cut it. We don't let our kids hand in homework with outdated numbers and irrelevant estimates. Our regulations should have a higher and more meaningful standard. And third, we should coordinate your regulations with the DPU's rules for fixing super-emitter gas leaks. Having your regulations work harmoniously with the super-emitter regulations of the DPU is the best means of reducing emissions efficiently and effectively. Our children and grandchildren are trusting us to do this work fast and to do it well. Thinking long-term, using real numbers, and collaborating with the DPU will go a long way toward living up to that trust. We can then realistically imagine our grandchildren's children enjoying a healthy, green, clean planet. Thank you.
Next is Claire Corcoran.
Claire Corcoran, Mothers Out Front. Public speaking is my least favorite activity, so forgive me if I just read my comments. And the fact that I'm here at all, speaking to you guys, shows you that I really do care a lot about this issue. I am very fortunate to be able to be a stay-at-home mom to my 3 kids. I am a Girl Scout troop leader, and I'm also a board member of the Friends of the Public Garden, an organization that has lost many trees to gas leaks along Commonwealth Avenue. It's cookie season in Girl Scout land, and I have brought some cookies that I will pass around to share with you, just to liven up the afternoon. So I'm going to tell you a story about my time as a Girl Scout troop leader. I was leading an activity on trees with my daughter's Girl Scout troop. One particular child, my daughter's best friend, had always been a huge nature buff her whole life. She loves to hike, bicycle, bird watch, connect with nature. And so this activity was supposed to really appeal to her, but this day she seemed sad and disengaged, even though she was usually a really enthusiastic kid. I asked her what was wrong, and she looked up at me with tears in her eyes, this beautiful child, and said, "I hate studying sustainability in school. It's too depressing and hopeless, and there's nothing we can do about it." I realized in that moment that I was done compartmentalizing my fears about climate change and what the legacy of our actions will be. The fact is that we are still within the arc of choice. Our actions will have a profound impact on the future of our planet and our children's environment. I told Nora Brady that she was wrong, that it's not hopeless and it's not too late. And I told her that I would do everything in my power to make sure our leaders make the right choices for our children's future. So that is why I am here today to ask you to implement these gas leak regulations as stringently as you can to achieve real reductions in methane emissions over the long term. I ask you to plan to cap emissions beyond 2020, to use the most accurate state-of-the-art measurements and real data, not estimates, of leak volumes, to verify and enforce these regulations with monitoring, and to coordinate with the DPU on finding and fixing the large volume super emitter gas leaks. Uncombusted methane is 86 times worse than carbon dioxide for the climate. It suffocates our street trees, causes asthma, and consumers pay for the leaked gas. Meanwhile, on the national scene, our new president seems determined to reverse the progress we've made to date. Leadership on climate change is going to have to come from the state governments, and this is a huge opportunity to show the rest of the country how to speed up the repair of our leaky infrastructure. Fixing the large volume leaks quickly is a critical action that we need to take now for Nora and for all our children.